Committee does consist. Thank you. Hi again, Angelica Loop, Director of Community Development. We'll go ahead and get started. Mayor John Primith is on his way. So if you'd like to make a public comment, we do have public comment cards up here. And we will, I see Lily run to the back. So we'll give her a moment to come back. I could go ahead and take roll call. So Mayor Primith on his way. Jack Donovan is here. Council member, excuse me. And so I see some folks. Yes. So for those on Zoom, please go ahead and raise your hand if you're interested in making a public comment. Also, anyone in the audience, if you're interested in making a public comment, we do have comment cards here. So we'll give folks just a minute. We're encouraging people to fill out a public comment card. At the end of the presentation, we'll have staff available here in the room to answer questions. I guess I'm not understanding your question. Would you like to be recorded? Okay, sure. At the end of the meeting? Well, staff, that will be up to the subcommittee members if they would like to take questions from the audience.
We have one public comment speaker card. The first person is Christopher Sutton. Sir, when you come to the podium, you'll have 3 minutes. There's a little button on, there you go.
Done the drill before. Yeah, my name is Christopher Sutton. I'm an attorney. I've represented both individual Caltrans tenants and the Caltrans tenant groups since I first became a lawyer in 1984. So it's been almost 40 years of dealing with Caltrans on a wide variety of issues. During the earlier round of sales, and I have my summary that between 1995 and 2005, Caltrans engaged in a number of sales to the tenants within South Pasadena and Pasadena, not El Sereno. And I have created a summary of that data. There's about 7 or 8 copies of that summary, and I've updated it over the years. One of the last sales was as a result of a lawsuit, which is the corner of Highland and Fairview, Harry Nicholson, who we had to sue them. He had a property, he was living in a house in Pasadena that needed $500,000 of repairs, and they didn't want to do the repairs. So we sued them, and he had a signed contract, had money in escrow, and eventually we settled that, and they sold him a house in South Pass that did not need as many repairs. But the lesson that we learned from the Nicholson case and from the other cases is that Caltrans will do anything to avoid repairing the properties, anything. And they've taken essentially the official position, well, not, or an unofficial position that's somehow consistent as to both apartments and houses, that no unit needs more than $30,000 in repairs. And they across the board, and that's the reason they chose Friendship for the 626 prospect, because Friendship adopted the Caltrans estimate, whereas Heritage did an honest estimate of over $100,000 a unit that they pledged to put into the building. And yet Caltrans chose the bidder that was going to do less work for the tenants. Same thing's true down on a house on Meridian, where Caltrans says, oh, well, 30,000, but the tenant paid a contractor, and the contractor said it's north of $300,000. And I've been through the house, and it's true. The house is the foundation, the watering, the plumbing, everything. And the reason is that Caltrans did no maintenance from the beginning of when they purchased the houses to the present, unless they were forced to do it, between the 1973 injunction and 1999 injunction, when they were ordered to keep the houses occupied and maintained. They had the tenants do the maintenance and then take it off their rent. Starting in 2002, they ended that practice, and then no one did the maintenance. I want to hand in this summary of the sales that occurred during that 10-year period. And so the members of the committee and the staff can see the past, because Caltrans erroneously refers to the current sales as phase one. It's not phase one.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so we do have a second comment card. Mr. Omari Ferguson. When you come to the podium, sir, you have 3 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, hi. I guess my comment has to do with like SB 381 and the dispossession of the properties. And my concern is like twofold. The first concern is like, what are the consequences if the city does not build the affordable housing as required for the 3-to-1 ratio? And my second question is, how can the city even allow for there to be the development of 3-to-1 without revising its current building code? Because we don't allow for small lot subdivisions currently, and we have a lot of things that overall just impede development. So I don't see how any of this can be brought into compliance without first addressing some of those underlying issues. So that's it for my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We do have a third speaker. His name is Bill Kelly. Sir, again, I also let you know you have 3 minutes as soon as you come to the podium.
Great, thank you. I would propose that the public comment be after the presentation, so we could be educated on what's at issue more than we have this time, and also when the mayor arrives, but I will go ahead anyway. I'm here to represent Care First. I'm a longtime resident of South Pasadena. And when I look at the material being presented, Care First would like to see increased density, duplexes, triplexes where possible, quads on the vacant properties where it is possible. You know, there's enough footage on the lot, and believes that a nonprofit housing agency listed by Caltrans as an HRE should be worked with by the city to see if that's achievable. The region desperately needs affordable housing. My daughters who grew up here need affordable housing. My elderly father just lost affordability status in an apartment he rents. He needs affordable housing. I had a mother who could have used affordable housing here. I drove to and from San Diego for years because there was no affordable housing here. And that was a cost to me. The discussion surrounding these houses needs to be forward-looking, not dwelling on the history. I respect what the freeway fighters have done. I respect their knowledge. But younger people need to see some hope on the future that there will be housing that they can afford in this region. Finally, I'll just say that while I am old, my concern here is with the future. And I believe that we need to look to the future, not the past, not try to restore neighborhoods the way they were. Because if you don't have density, some reasonable density in this area, you can't achieve climate change goals, air pollution goals, water resource management goals, all of those types of things that we need to achieve going forward. So I urge you to try to work with a nonprofit housing agency and create as much affordable housing as possible using this opportunity of the change of ownership of the Caltrans houses. It's a rare opportunity. The land suddenly is there. Money is there, and the time is right, and it's much needed. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And we have a last speaker, and he is Mr. Sam Burgess.
Good afternoon. First, I would like to make a suggestion that in future meetings, you attempt to have one at least in the evening. I do know there's at least 10 or 15 people that could not attend because of work. And they really wanted to attend. So, and I realize this afternoon is much more convenient for staff as opposed to the evening, but public should be able to attend. Secondly, I was under the impression that this was going to be some type of a question answer period so that we can get our concerns answered. Apparently it is not. And my last comment is 626 Prospect. It's a part of this whole prospect. I mean, idea, but it's not being discussed today. For some reason, city council, city staff do not want to talk about 626 except in secret meetings. Why? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, people, the guests on Zoom, if you do have a question or a comment on the public comment item number 1, please raise your hand. We have Delane Shane. As soon as you start speaking, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead. Mhm. Ms. Shane, give me 1 second. Okay, Ms. Delaney, I apologize. Go ahead. And go ahead and unmute.
All right. Can you hear me now?
There you go. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Delane Shane. I live at 2003 Meridian, and I wanted to echo Sam Burgess's comments about the fact that this should be an evening meeting because many of my neighbors, maybe 15 or 20, were interested in attending, but this is a work period for them. So in the future, we would appreciate evening meetings rather than middle of the day, which is not helpful for those that are employed and must work. Secondly, I appreciate the fact that there is a dearth of affordable housing in this community, but our neighborhood is not meant to be the catch-all and be-all for that. It should be equitable across the entire city. The city has failed to do its part over the decades to ensure affordable housing, and we agree on that. Our neighborhood is extremely dense in Bonita Drive, Gillette Crescent, and whatnot. So putting up duplexes and quadplexes is going to be problematic in our neighborhood. And I appreciate Mr. Kelly's concern. I share the same concerns about the environment, about affordability, but this is a much broader question and really is more suitable for the general plan update and specific plan update, where we can definitely try to ensure more affordable housing in certain areas that we need to increase the density, such as along Fair Oaks, Mission, and Huntington Drive. So for us, The freedom fighters and all that is not history. We haven't had our streets paved for over since the 60s. We have a reservoir that's about to fall apart that has been around since the 60s. We have these houses. We deserve as much as any other a citizen to have safe and secure housing. And so we would like more discussion about the South Pasadena Preservation Foundation's plan and not have the city involved with real estate. It is far better to tackle these other areas when we focus on the general plan process and housing element. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. The third guest that hand is raised is Mr. Josh Albertson. Sir, go ahead.
I'm going to echo Bill Kelly. It kills me when we have public comment at the beginning of these meetings because we just have to guess what staff is going to say. It's not real public input when we don't know what we're giving public input on. My question is there, I read the laws and I was hoping a city attorney would be here. Is there anything in the Roberti Act or SB 381 that they are saying that you cannot build multifamily housing on these lots for? I know South Pasadena could easily change the zoning, and if South Pasadena zones for multifamily, is there anything that is in Roberti or 381 that says you cannot build multifamily housing? Because it's been relayed to HCD. I've heard it through Care First, so I'm hearing it fourth hand or something like this, that they are making that case. So I'd like to know, is there anything in the laws that says you cannot build triplexes or fourplexes on these properties? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We do have a third guest on Zoom. Okay, I apologize. They are not there on Zoom anymore. So those are the only guests we have on Zoom. We do have one more chamber speaker card for the first comment. And his name is Roberto Flores.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I just wanted to echo also what Sam was saying. But I think you all are planning on having additional sessions. So, but I also want to echo the part of special circumstance tenants like 66. The other group of special circumstance tenants that are going to need support are the tenants, the plaintiffs that just won the inflated price order. So we were wondering maybe there could be special sessions on that or something to deal, with those special circumstances.
Thank you, sir. We will continue to receive any further public comments either at the end of the special meeting or now I let Angelica Loop, our director, speak.
Thank you. Yes, I do want to confirm that we will open up public comment again at the end for those that would like to comment and for the sake of the mayor to hear those public comments. And also the mayor has shared that he will be able to answer questions. And as I mentioned earlier, staff will be here as well to answer questions as we have some boards up around the room. And at this point, I'd like to introduce Leah Demarest, our Senior Management Analyst for Housing Programs, to provide a presentation. On the agenda, you may have seen that we will be providing some updates and go over some potential options for the city to consider. And we are starting this meeting with the subcommittee. We will be hosting a community meeting in early February in the evening. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor Primith, Councilmember Donovan, and everyone in attendance. Today, I'll be presenting some updates and potential policy options about the 20 unoccupied Caltrans properties being offered to the city of South Pasadena. The primary focus of this meeting is Caltrans disposition of the vacant properties. I'll share updates on the city's due diligence on the properties, preliminary potential policy options that staff is exploring, and next steps. I'll also give a brief update on Caltrans sales program for the occupied properties. After this presentation, we hope that community members in attendance will participate in the open house portion of this meeting. We envision this as an opportunity for community members to ask questions and for staff to provide additional information related to the implementation of SB 381. We're nearing the finish line with the property inspections and repair cost estimates. Most inspections have been completed, as have the South Pasadena Preservation Foundation's evaluations of the historic properties. At this point, we're waiting on the geotech and lead and asbestos reports, which we expect to be completed within the next week. And we anticipate receiving the final inspection reports with cost estimates within the next 2 to 3 weeks. As I mentioned earlier, staff is exploring potential policy options that City Council might consider in the coming weeks once all inspections and cost information is available. We'll continue to research the requirements under SB 381 and develop the policy options for City Council as we receive more information. So we prepared a few flowcharts to illustrate the series of potential options for the disposition of the vacant properties. The first decision that City Council will need to make is whether the city will purchase any or all of the 20 properties offered by Caltrans. As you know, any properties not acquired by the city will next be offered to Los Angeles County. If the city does purchase any or all of these properties, City Council will need to make decisions about the disposition and use of these properties. SB 381 requires that the 13 properties that do not have a historic designation be used for affordable rental or ownership. Potential policy options might include the city's as-is sale of any properties requiring minimal repairs for affordable homeownership, or the city's sale of properties to an experienced nonprofit affordable housing developer selected through an RFP process. Possible options that could accompany that latter pathway include only rehabilitating the properties or also adding a unit or an ADU to any of the properties. For the 7 properties with a historic designation, SB 381 allows for the city to resell them at their fair market value with the requirement that the city use the sales proceeds to finance the acquisition or production of 3 affordable units for every historic property sold. The law is less clear as to whether the historic property could instead be used for affordable rental or ownership, and staff is continuing to research this idea to determine whether it might be an option available for City Council's consideration. As I mentioned, I want to provide a brief update on the status of the Caltrans sale program for the tenant-occupied homes. So far, Caltrans has mailed 16 notices to tenants in South Pasadena, soliciting their interest in purchasing their Caltrans property. Caltrans is mailing these notices in batches to properties across the corridor, starting with residents with tenancies of more than 25 years. Caltrans mailed its first batch this past September and estimates that residents with less than 25 years tenancy will receive notices 9 to 12 months after that. The city staff will present the information covered today at an evening community meeting in early February to provide another opportunity for members of the public to learn about this process and to provide input. Staff will also continue to develop our ideas into policy options to discuss at an ad hoc committee meeting or a city council meeting in late February or early March once we have all the cost estimates. So in a few moments or after additional public comment, we'll invite community members to take a look at the informational boards around this room and to ask any questions to city staff. And Before we do that, I want to briefly introduce the topics that will be presented. One of the stations will include the 20 unoccupied properties overlaid on the city's zoning map. And also at this station, there'll be a mock-up showing an example of an addition of an ADU on an existing unoccupied Caltrans property in accordance with the city's ADU ordinance. Another station will show photos of small multi-unit properties across South Pasadena to illustrate that adding a unit or an ADU to certain Caltrans properties would align with the surrounding development of the neighborhood. And finally, I'll just toggle through these quickly because you've already seen them, but there will be a station with the 2 flow charts showing our ideas of potential policy options for the historic and non-historic properties should City Council decide that the city will purchase them. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. And I did want to just reiterate that we included these topics in the presentation, but because we will make the presentation available on our webpage under Community Development Housing Division so that the community can see what was available here today. Also, as Leah mentioned, staff is here so that if you had any questions that you can speak with staff directly. But I do want to, again, say that there's an opportunity if you would like to make public comment again, please come up and fill out a comment card. And anyone on Zoom, Lily, if you can let us know if people want to make comments on Zoom, you can monitor that as well. I do want to turn it over to Council Member Jack Donovan and Mayor John Primuth. We're happy to hear your thoughts, or if you have any questions regarding the presentation, we're available for that as well.
Okay, John and I will be available for questions. I hadn't intended to make a presentation here. It's more listening up here and then listening to you and answering whatever questions that I can. And I believe that John will echo that comment.
For those of you who attended the community outreach meeting in, I think it was November at the Masonic Lodge, you heard a lot from me. So those comments still apply. And if you need to talk with me one-on-one, I'm happy to do that. And as Community Development Director Frostalupo mentioned, I'll have a Q&A. I'm probably just going to invite people who want to come to my house and we'll sit down and we'll talk about it. So concerns that were mentioned here, I can talk about, not as far as giving you information that still is confidential. You know, the city is in a real estate buying process where that information is confidential. The city is in a lawsuit where the proceedings and what's happening is confidential. And that's not the city's determination, that's actually a legal determination. And because we have 5 council members who all need to have an equal voice in an ultimate disposition, the fact that I say something, I can't bind my colleagues to. So that's why I'm reticent to tell you absolute confirmed information that I can't even confirm because the council hasn't decided. So confidentiality doesn't mean you're not going to get the answer. It just means we're still in process. And process takes a long time. So when it stretches out, people get suspicious. It's not that. We are just trying to keep to the rules, stick to the pathway that we have to. Nevertheless, there's a bunch of things that can be talked about. You heard those when I mentioned it at the Masonic Lodge, and I'll go into more detail later. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any public comments?
There are no further public comments. Any guest on Zoom, if you have any public comments, please raise your hand so we can let you speak.
No, this is it.
There are no comments via Zoom,
Thank you, Lily.
and 1 person in chambers. Please state your name.
Joanne Knuckles, 1531 Ramona Avenue. on the 3-to-1 that you have to add if you're purchasing the house, the city purchases a house via 381, say there's 20 houses. That would be 60 more units. Is that 60 units added to the RENA number that we have already, which is the 2,067?
When we develop, if we develop 3-to-1, yes, those would be counted towards the RENA. That's
Okay,
affordable.
well, it seems to me that needs to be a consideration when you're talking about that you're supplying affordable housing, because you already have to supply over 2,000 units of affordable housing. So, and I think you're going to have trouble doing that from what I've heard. So adding another 60 is going to be something that's unattainable. And I think that has to be taken into consideration.
I apologize. I think I misunderstood your question. When we build the affordable housing through this SB 381, the units that we build as affordable housing will be counted towards the 2,067. It doesn't mean 2,067 plus an additional 60.
Okay, well, if you're looking for affordable units, is the city working to get credit for the units that the tenants are going to buy that will be affordable, and the past sales of about 35 to 40 that you have not gotten credit for?
We are looking into that.
Well, I think that should be the first order of business.
Yeah. RENA is a formula that excludes a lot of things you think should be included. It's really about new housing. And so we're trying to get as much credit as we possibly can, but it's a little, if we can build housing, we get credit for it against the RENA number.
Well, I think this
Whether we
is,
have a base that can already include what we already have, that's an open question.
okay, well, given that's a special circumstances and their houses that the state put an affordability covenant on, that the state that whoever is counting these probably doesn't even know about, I think it would behoove the city to at least make a very concerted effort to get credit for those houses that have already been sold in the late 90s that Chris Sutton talked about that were in South Pasadena.
Thank you, ma'am. We do have two more public speaker card. Mr. Omari Ferguson. You have 3 minutes, sir.
How's it going? Yeah, I guess I would, the staff mentioned what their things they were considering as far as options on the table. I didn't hear the option of lot subdivisions being included as an option that would give you, and I think that that's kind of something that should be considered, especially considering that I also didn't really hear the housing element mentioned. I understand this is a different topic in a sense, but a lot of what's happening here could be advantageous, as kind of Joanne previously mentioned. If we're looking at RENA numbers, this is a fantastic opportunity for the city to, kind of hit two birds with one stone if we kind of look at some of the housing element issues as well. And then the last point is basically delisting. Is that being considered as an option as far as like these being historical, but some of them are in a state of significant disrepair or need a significant amount of work? At what point is it more cost effective to just delist it and deal with the property versus trying to restore it? So that should probably be defined. The city should probably have some type of threshold that they define and make that clear and transparent. If it's like a 3x multiplier or whatever they determine to be cost effective. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. And the next one, public comment card is Mr. Chris Sutton. Sir, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, so in the context of affordable housing, I think that the analysis should include all of the vacant lots that Caltrans has in the city, and the city should have a priority of access to the vacant lots. In January of 2019, when he first took office, Governor Newsom signed 2 executive orders. When one ordered Caltrans to use all vacant land sales for affordable housing. Sadly, Caltrans has ignored that executive order when sales were presented to the CTC throughout the state. Caltrans would come up with an excuse why not to do that. So that the city needs to focus, I think, also on the vacant lots. There's a very large vacant lot on Fairview, just south of Columbia on the east side of the street, across from former Mayor Stamp's house. And there are other vacant lots that the city needs to deal with. In terms of the historic properties, Caltrans obligations under that concept is under federal law, and whatever the state historic preservation officer decides. So in terms of, I think that there's needs to be the involvement of more agencies when you deal with the historic properties. Recently, I think about a year or so ago, the Preservation Foundation and other people in the city convinced Caltrans that the garden that had been separated from the Garfield house was not a development site, but was a National Register site. And therefore, it was sold to the owner of the Garfield house to reunite the property at an extremely reduced price because of the listing on the National Register. And so that the Caltrans staff can be persuaded that when it comes to historic properties, given the need to comply with the Federal Register, and if the city or someone buys them, the property should reflect the fact that there's going to be this work that has to be done. And that's a restriction on the property that should not be sold at fair market value, but should be sold based upon the fact that all of this work needs to be done. And really, as I said previously, the lack of maintenance of these properties lies at the feet of Caltrans. And in 1999, when the city obtained the third injunction, Caltrans misled Judge Ferguson, because in the first two injunctions, the judges said, you have to keep the properties maintained and occupied. And Caltrans said to Judge, we have no incentive to violate that. So he took that out. And immediately they started vacating the properties and not doing maintenance. So that the 1999 injunction, unfortunately led to the lack of maintenance.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton. A question to Director Frostolupo. I believe there are only 2 vacant sites on the Caltrans surplus property inventory. Is that correct?
Thank you, that we're being offered at this moment.
Well, no, on the whole 68 properties. I think there's only the community garden and the
and
lot
one.
that Mr. Sutton referred to on Fairview.
That's correct.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
And yes, we do. We have one final one. Gerald Laurel. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Hi, thank you. I was just looking over the paperwork and I have a specific question about the list of properties under SB 580. I'm kind of confused as to, it says properties that have not already been sold shall be next offered to nonprofit entities. I was wondering what the process and timeline is for them being sold before being offered to the nonprofit entities. Are these going to go on the public markets, or how does that work in particular?
Yeah, I'll direct that question to Director Frostolupo.
Thank you.
The waterfall is that it will go to public auction, and that's the very last option. And that's actually a question that should be directed to Caltrans. So I can't give you a better estimated time frame or a time frame, but that would be the very last option.
I see. And is there somewhere we can find the list of those 7 and 13 properties that are, I guess, owned now by the city of South Pasadena?
So let me direct that question to Director Frostolupo. I'm sorry, we have to maintain a certain protocol in terms of Q&A.
For
This
sure.
is not, this is general public comment. So
Understood.
council members can refer questions to staff. So I will direct that question to staff.
You got it.
Sure.
The city of South Pasadena has not purchased any properties. The city has been offered, the city received a solicitation letter from Caltrans to purchase 20 vacant properties. We have not purchased them yet. We're doing our part to,
Gotcha.
due diligence part and inspections and whatnot.
Okay, appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. We have no more public comments in chambers or via Zoom.
Okay, thank you. That was the end of our agenda. We do want to allow the community members that are here an opportunity to come and speak with staff around the room regarding the boards. If there are any. I will look at my agenda to make sure if I'm not missing anything. If there are any final comments from subcommittee members. Councilmember Donovan or Mayor?
No, I think it's great that staff will be here to answer questions. And then I've already indicated I'll be offering an opportunity for Q&A with me. Subject to everything I said about council really needing to make final decisions on everything. So I'm not in any sense of the word authoritative on behalf of the city.
Thank you. So at this point, we will conclude this part and we will be here to help answer any questions regarding the boards that we have around the room. Thank you.